Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets may have capped off their season against the Chicago Bulls, but there were still 9 more games to play, the most recent of which a blowout loss to the Indiana Pacers where, gosh darn it, it was embarrassing on every single level. We get it on the mess coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug... oh, it's a classic 133-111 drubbing on the road in Indy at the hand of the Pacers, but this is so much more than an ugly loss by 22 on the road.
Yeah, look, they won 3 games in a row. They don't really make you believe, but it's like, hey, you know, I guess you can't fully mathematically count them out after those 3 wins. Then they come out and look absolutely horrible against the Lakers in the first quarter and somehow look arguably even worse against the Pacers here on Monday night. A total give up rollover, no other way to put it, over the last 2 first quarters of games. So you count the Lakers first quarter and this first quarter against the Pacers. The Pacers and Lakers combined for 74, Nets score 38 points total. So 74-38. And the reason I bring up those first quarters is because by the end of the first quarter, you know it's over, right? Yeah. Like, and you just say to yourself, the Nets have given up on the season. And why shouldn't we're not going to. We're going to come out and podcast, 5 days a week, no matter what. But this is the situation that the Nets put you in that make it very difficult because it was epically clear tonight, especially in this game for the Pacers, that they had fully given up. They did not care. Nobody cared. Nobody was mad about it. They were getting completely rolled. I'll go through a bunch of examples later of just an embarrassing loss. I mean, so many plays in this game. You'd be benched for seeing 2 of them in a game, and there was 10 in this game. A total give up, a total rollover, one of the most embarrassing losses. They've given up on the season. It's hard to look the fans square in the eyes and tell you they're trying. You can't watch this Pacer game and say that they're trying.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about, too, here later on in the episode, just the absolute mess that it is from an organizational standpoint. When you get to this portion of the season and you see this type of product on the court, it just reeks of ineptitude with all the other decisions that you made along the way across the course of this season. But you mentioned it, man, 43-point first quarter that you gave up to the Indiana Pacers tonight, 43-27. They gave up 30-plus points in each of the next 2 quarters as well. Obviously, by the way, it said 133-111. Well, that's because the Nets won the final quarter 34-25 in absolute dumpster time. So we don't
sorry to interrupt you, but they've done this 2 games in a row. They do this all season where they're getting totally crushed and then they get into garbage time and they make up a few more points. So it looks, this one still looks terrible, but it looks a little better on paper, even though this is a 30-point loss. I know they didn't end up losing by 30. They lost by 22. Congrats. This was a 30-point loss. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, 100%. And then one of the key stats, I won't even get into the key stats right now. One of the most frustrating things about it is that you come out with the lineup that you have, the roster that you have. We've talked about the young players. We talk about the development. Nobody cared. The level of access, and we can talk specific plays later, the level of access in the paint, the level of transition, lack of defense for the Brooklyn Nets, the lack of hustle. We talk about how these games matter for other teams, positioning in the playoffs, etc. That's totally great. But as we've said many times before on this podcast, so many of the players that you watch on a night in, night out basis right now are going to be here next year. So there has to be a sense of we are setting the baseline of who we are as a team. And to have you collectively, your entire roster, check out on the game, maybe outside of Trendon Watford. I will acknowledge that Trendon Watford only knows one way how to play, and he's going in there and getting his minutes, not to be tongue-in-cheek about it. But I could not believe, coming off of that Lakers game, that they walked right back out there in Indy and said, yeah, you know what? We get it. 9 more games to go. When do we get to stop? Why don't you just give us the losses we need not bother playing? You and I did detach ourselves emotionally a lot of times from the team and the games. But these are the ones where like it makes your blood boil on a kind of on a business model level. Like, hey, this is a product.
Oh, yeah.
This is a product, and you're basically just handing out an absolute rotten sandwich to your customer base and being like, but take a little nibble. You might like it.
Yeah. Like, honestly, as a fan, like, it's like whatever. I kind of expected this. We've talked about this for a while. We said this is a trade deadline. We've talked about this for a while. We said the Nets have a total misunderstanding of their talent. Like, they've misplayed, I think, their hand here to a pretty alarming degree. None of that's new. Yeah, it's more egregious. All right, like you said, on just the intellectual honesty part of it. It's like, just don't lie to us. Just say you've given up. Like, don't give us any more platitudes. Don't talk about hustling. Don't talk about like it all still means something. It clearly doesn't. That's the only point. That's the part that I only kind of like jump ugly at. The rest of it, we've already known this about the team. They stink. They stink. Yeah. So it's that part's not new, but just don't lie about it going forward, and don't lie about where this team is, especially going into next year too. I have a couple stats here, but like that's the most egregious part. It's fine. Just own it. You stink. You didn't care. Yeah, it was a back-to-back and you got to travel. I get that part's tough. Like you're down bad on the traveling and the back-to-back, except this is just not the first time they did it though. They've done this so many times this year. So if this is the first time all year, okay, you get it. Little hall pass. It's fine. When it's the 50th time, no, like it's not that many times. Like the 30th time this year, you just kind of checked out. And no, it's just like you don't get any benefit of the doubt.
And by the way, too, the last point that I'll make on this before we get into stats and some of the actual things out of this game, and then we'll go organizational level. One of the things is you could lose a game like this by 22 points or by 30, by 30 points. Like you could lose a game by an enormous margin. But as we've done before, we will go in and pluck out the nice performances, the plays, right? Things that they can build on, exchanges between some of the young players. Like I'm willing to go in and take 12 solid looking plays that speak to things that they're trying to do from a set standpoint, right? Different things they're trying offensively and defensively. I'll take that right now. We understand the season is over. We understand that they're not going to the play-in. They're not going to the playoffs, right? But to not even have that be available in a game like this, that's what I think is like the ultimate insult back at the fan base is we're not even going to give you a breadcrumb trail to follow here about interesting things that you could get excited about. Coming up here in a second, we will talk about all the key stats in this game, of which there are plenty, and some of those visuals that absolutely gut punch you if you are a fan watching this team right now. We'll get into those coming up next.
All right, let you know this next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Look, sometimes we just need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Maybe it's a big thing. Maybe it's a small thing. Certain things in your life can just start getting to you. It's important to let it out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. I want to just talk about the things that are getting to you on a daily basis. Like I said, sometimes it's the good things. Sometimes it's the things you struggle with. Sometimes it's the things that get you upset or sad or even excited. It can be great to just talk to someone in your life on a professional level that can help guide you along the way, that can help you feel better about these things, can help you deal with it in the moment and deal with it in the long term. This is where BetterHelp can step in. Look, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. You can match with a licensed therapist. You can switch at any time. If it's not someone that you kind of jive with, they're going to find someone that works with you and for you. That's the way that they designed this thing to be super flexible, suited to your schedule. If you visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA, you're going to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, so as we continue the post-game episode for the Locked On Nets podcast, we also go ahead and let you know and ask you a bit of a question here. Are you watching Fox Sports on ESPN or your TV all day? Have you turned down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch over to what? Us. Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube and free on the Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now we will butt up against it. I'm not screaming, Doug. I'm not coming out here and losing my cool about what I'm watching on the court. But when you go inside some of these stats, I plucked out this one. I know you have others as well. But for me, and it doesn't even do justice because the fast break points, the Pacers had 23 in this game. But those 23 were in the first 24 to 26 minutes of this game. Had this game mattered at all, they would have had 1,000. Like, I could not believe, and it's been a problem for this team all year, but the amount of, and this happened in the Lakers game, it was like kind of not even transition fast break. It was LeBron James throwing 3/4 court passes. Tonight, it was just, there was a sequence where the Brooklyn Nets rotated the ball offensively, went from the top of the key to the wing, back and forth, 2-3-man game, multiple passes, and the Pacers rotated defensively, challenged every play, contested the shot, missed three-pointer in the corner. Going the other way, they dribbled down the court, dropped it off the top of the key, nobody guarding them, wide open triple. It was such the contrast of two teams, just one playing basketball and the other one kind of doing some light cardio.
Yeah, look, the Pacers play an insanely fast pace, so you know that's going to come. Like, Haliburton on the hit-aheads is awesome. They get these runouts, and they've done that all year long. That's the pace they want to play at. So it's not like totally unheard of that they would do this. The problem was with it was done with such ease that it's like, it's one thing to pay second fastest pace in the league. Sorry, Wizards. It's one thing to like have it be a fast-paced game where it's up and down and you're trying to play like cross-match transition D. It's another one where you get the hit ahead and it's like, oh, open layup, right?
Yeah.
Like, or just like lose a guy in transition, or like Haliburton's running down the court and everyone's points to the other guy and says, he's your man. And he dunks, right? Like dunks it. Just no one within 3 feet of him. Like,
I have never seen 5 Nets players all be within the arc defensively, and yet a player, Haliburton, go untouched to the basket. Like, it's almost impossible to be that close and that far away at the same time.
Yeah, total hammer time for him. Like, he did like a half-hearted look away to freeze the last defender, and that was it. I mean, they had so many easy fast break points. There was 8 to 10. This is not hyperbole. There was 8 to 10 of the easiest baskets you'll ever see in your life, highlighted by second quarter at the line. I think it was Jalen Smith at the line. I can't remember who was at the line. It doesn't matter.
Not even Turner, but yeah.
It was an and one. And the Nets just don't know that it's one shot. And he misses, and Aaron Nesmith literally just walks into the lane and puts it back in because none of the Nets didn't bother boxing out. They didn't bother moving off the block. Nobody even moved. And it was just, it's egregiously bad. And if you want to sum this performance up with one play, like that was it, because it summed up so many things. We're not paying attention, right? Like we don't know it's one shot. We're not paying attention. There's not even a half-hearted attempt, even if we were paying attention. You don't even see the guys moving to go get it. And they just kind of put the ball in. So no effort, no attention to detail, nothing like that. And it was just play after play. They had so many points in you mentioned the fast break points, 23-6 points in the paint. The Pacers scored 70 points in the paint, 70 points in the paint. And at one point they had more points in the paint than the Nets had points. It was like 36 all or something like that. And not all points, because when you think of points in the paint, you think, oh, you're playing low in the block and you're putting guys in the post. Now, points in the paint can just mean when the guys are in the restricted area because they're making layups, or it's a layup line, right? Or it's just like free runs to the basket, or you got back cut because you just got lazy on defense and the guys, they weren't even running screens. Like the guys were just back cutting and running to the basket over and over and over again. So without going through every single play, it was just these plays that are like basketball 101, honestly. Yeah. Like just the stuff you teach the very first day you start dribbling a ball in rec or CYO or like AAU or like whatever it is. These are the things that like you try to stop day one, and then that's just kind of allowed it to happen over and over and over.
Yeah, and it's too far along here. In the third segment, we'll talk about coaching, organizational, the kind of the higher level stuff that this represents as well. But you're too far along to have a total checkout here in terms of understanding the system, right? Where you're supposed to be, the plays you're supposed to be making. This is an active choice to not be a part of it. I'm going to go player here for a minute. Now, we rarely do this inside of an episode, but I'm going to tell you maybe the most elite tweet I've ever seen in my life. Hey, Blah, who follows the show, supports us, and we always appreciate him. This from him. Not a science guy, but if Mikal is Iron Man, doesn't that mean that he's been oxidizing and getting rusty? I thought that this was like an all-time way to encapsulate like what Mikal looks like out there. And this was another great example of just like, for what you're supposed to be, to this team. Clearly, you're not relative to the trade when you came over. Then there's the thing that we've done before and say, listen, it's not only his fault. This organization is a mess. But tonight is another really big example. Nobody cared. There was never a timeout here where anybody, and Mikal should be chief among them, turned to the other players and said, hey, guys, I know that the season's over, but this is embarrassing. We need to do something, show something. Like, and that is all maybe for the cameras. It's all kind of fluff. And at the same time, I wouldn't hate seeing it, even if it's just an act. Nobody even bothered with that for the Brooklyn Nets on this bench.
That's a great call. It's a great call. Like, no one even pretends to be mad because
right,
you can't.
It.
Well, he did hit the celly down 25 at one point.
And I noted that was the other one too. He hit it and cut the lead
something
to 20
like that
at the time and does the celly to the bench. And I thought, you know what? If we're talking optics, buddy, this is not necessarily the time to go, what do you know about that?
I'm glad you noticed that too. That was a moment where I was thinking, we've let go of the rope. Like it's like we are. We're so devoid. We're so far afield of reality that. And maybe it's just instinct. And if I hit a 3-pointer in a game, you'd literally.
Well, I go ballistic because how'd I get into this NBA game and then look at me open in the corner?
Of course. But it's like, I don't know. Is this really what we should be doing here? And it's a great call by you to say, which I'd actually never even thought about during the game, which is there is no one on this team that kind of is the guy like, get behind me, get mad, start yelling, leader. Like, what are we doing out here? This is embarrassing. It's just business as usual.
Yep.
Like business as usual, and we stink. And you never want to force that onto somebody. Like, you shouldn't be someone you're not. Like he's a pretty mild. Bridge is a mild mannered guy. It is what it is, and like you shouldn't do it. But the fact that there kind of is nobody on the team here that's a yeller. I mean, some of these guys get chippy. Like, Schroeder probably could have gotten kicked out. Like it was.
Well, I will say, Schroeder, who's coming, hasn't been with his team, but for a minute, he's the guy that in timeouts and stuff you see, not in this game, but overall, you've seen him pull guys together, try to communicate, discuss what needs to happen here. And to your point, right, wrong, indifferent, how it goes down. He gets into it with Smith. He tries to go with the chest of Smith. I mean, at least that, right? Like whatever it is, at least show that on an individual game level, you care about what's happening here and you're frustrated because you are down 20 and you are playing meaningless minutes in meaningless games. Like that's not a thing you don't hate to see from players.
Yeah. So it's a good call by you to like, just sort of have like the lack of awareness or just really not having it's not in anyone's personality wheelhouse to like be like this. We've seen this, and it's not like guys who weren't here like Cam or DSJ or maybe DSJ is a little bit like that kind of. I mean, he at least plays with a lot of intensity when he's on the court. But they just don't have guys like this. And it's just one of the myriad of problems around the team. It's just that they don't have a personality. They don't have the personality of a team that's like a fight back team. They just don't have that in them. They've gone the opposite direction.
And frankly, Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy that has that personality, and it's almost like the team has drained him of that. And that's always a great sign when you actually take some of that personality you need. You've actually just drunned it out of all of your players on your roster. Come up here in a second. It's not just about the product on the court, guys. It's what it symbolizes about this organization. Let's go high level and explain to you why this is an absolute mess in every single possible way. We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before that, tell you about our friends over at Game Time, gametime.co. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. Makes getting tickets even faster, even easier. The prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch. Where do you hear about that? They got killer last-minute deals. They got all-in prices, views from your seat, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Look, all you want to do you go to the gametime.co. You're going to get those flash deals. You're going to get the zone deals. You're going to be able to see exactly what you're going to see from your seat. You get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. Get Game Time ticket coverage too. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. You're going to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
All right, so as we tie a pretty little bow on the Brooklyn Nets postgame, 133-111, losing on the road to the Indiana Pacers, which, by the way, as a reminder, coming into the season, we talked with Tony East. The Brooklyn Nets and the Indiana Pacers were kind of in the same position entering the year. Expectations, could they be a back-end playoff team? What was it going to look like? So nothing better than just watching one car careening off into a ditch and the other one putting on cruise control as they sit there in the 6th seed and put a little bit of extra distance between themselves and the Miami Heat. That being said, you mentioned it here earlier. The other problem with games like these down the stretch is everything that organizationally you communicated to your fan base at the trade deadline and also after the All-Star break when you let go of Jacques Vaughn. You kept saying this season is something that matters to us. Making the playoffs matter to us. But you don't make any real moves at the deadline outside of letting go of Royce O'Neal. Then you fire Jacques Vaughn because, hey, it's not working. We need a new voice. We bring in Kevin Ollie. They're now, I think, 8-14 underneath his tenure, which you perfectly laid out was obviously going to be the case because it's a bad team. Yeah. It's impossible to now look at this with another 8 games to go and not either one of two things. Either you're really bad at your jobs because you thought it was going to be good, or you're willing to really sell a bad bill of goods to everybody when it seems so obvious that it's not what you're telling everyone it is.
Yeah, it's like impossible to really even know like sort of what their thought process here is. I think like it's hard to know if it's delusional or just willing to absorb some short-term losses because they're really so set on 2025 being the free agency year. So like I'm
just really quick here because you've said this a number of times and I want to make like I think it's important to stake the flag now. You keep saying 2025. I think a lot of people are under this impression it's this offseason, and I think you have been 100% right about it is another year away, and you need to settle into that because that is one thing that does seem to be communicated about the way the organization has done things.
Yeah, no, I don't think they have any. They have nothing they can do this offseason. Like it's short of just doing the thing they didn't seem to want to do at the trade deadline, which is trade Bridges. They have no other moves to make. Like maybe re-sign Claxton, which we'll spend a lot of the offseason talking about that. That's looking like not the way to go every single day. Like I don't know what the number is going to be or what the market's going to be, but we'll talk about this a little bit on the next episode, I guess, too, about like offseason plans. But like that every day that goes by looks like, I mean, 18 million for this guy. There's no why. like for what? He's a nice player, but I just like at this point in their franchise, like I'm just not sure why they would do it. No, I don't think. I mean, look, it's so again, it's hard to know if they're just like, hey, look, it's a 2025 play. We got to get some of this bad stuff off the books, like Simmons. We'll be totally cap clean. We'll have Bridges at a good number still. Like, and we're just going to absorb it. And that's what they've sold ownership on. And then they're just like, and we'll just deal with whatever happens with the fans and like the on the court thing. Cause we're just stuck. Like we don't have it any other way to go. And they did like the one little move, like fire Vaughn. So like, it looks like they did something, but we all knew that wasn't going to do anything. Yeah. And so, but they're just, so I think it's that. I think it's that they're looking further ahead to 2025. They think guys like Mitchell or someone like that's going to come loose. And they're just gonna sit. They're just gonna ride it out. Good luck, fans. It's gonna be this a long. We got 82 games plus the last 6 from this one. It's gonna be a long run.
And that's a part of it too. Again, I think I don't know if I've referenced it before. The New York Rangers in hockey did this a few years ago. They came out and said like, "Hey, listen, we tried to do this version of it. It didn't work. We're gonna strip this thing down. It's gonna be bad for a couple of years, but you just trust us that we know." That it was bad. We know we need to change directions here. And in a couple of seasons, you'll start to see it and then hold us accountable at that point. And now you've seen them and they're a really good team and they're making a playoff run. They're one of the best teams in the NHL. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, again, I understand why you don't come out and say, gosh, we're bad. But I think you had that opportunity if you were Sean Marks and Joe Tsai and the Nets just come out and say, listen, we went all in on the superstar era. You all saw it. We tried to do everything we could. And I'm not even talking about lay the blame at the players' feet, right? Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Ben Simmons. I'm not talking about laying it off. I'm just saying we went all in. It did not work out. And it's gonna take a couple of seasons here to get back on track. And the problem I think they ran into was, as we said, not just trading Mikal Bridges, going back to last deadline, going back to the offseason or this deadline, because that's actually what I think makes it harder to come out and say that, because in theory, you have players of a certain age and skill set and timeline that aren't going to want to hear you communicate that, even if they're trying to send it back up the chain of command. We'll tell you, look what we're doing on the court. This is not working. It's not going to be the answer.
Yeah, they're in a very, very tricky spot. Like it's an unenviable spot. They took a big swing. It did not work out, and the spot stinks. But to not lie, I hate to say it because I don't think anyone's lying. To have it be very obvious that this team, like, let me put it this way. You watch a game like tonight, and it's very obvious that this team is so far away. Like this is not some one piece away team. Like even if they brought in,
still cost the same, right? Like it all still costs the same.
Yeah,
to get in, so
yeah, right. It's still costs what it costs, but like this team isn't just plug and play. Put Donovan Mitchell in for Ben Simmons and you're a 4 seed. Yeah. Like that's like you're crazy if you think that. And so, like that's the other part that's just so hard to see is that like the level of superstar that you would need to get on the tail end of this is not just, hey, let's add, I'm trying to think of an example of a team, but like, you're like OKC, you're like, if we make, we swap Giddey for like someone that's like, 1.5 times as good. And we're like legit contenders for 5 years. Right. Like that's not what's happening here. You put a top 15 guy on the team now. And it's like, I hope they don't get injured and maybe they'll be a 5th seed. That's kind of what we're looking at with this team. That's the other very tough pill to swallow is that if you could watch it and think that it was close or like a fighting chance, you could tell yourself one story. But with games like this, where everyone just gives up and they stink and they get blown out, there's no story to tell. There's no story to tell. Is hopefully all the players are different players.
It's not your journey; it's somebody else's journey. This is like
hopefully all the players are different
series,
too,
right? We're gonna reboot, bring some new younger actors, and then we'll see how their film plays out before all of our.
It didn't work. It didn't work. They took a big swing. It didn't work. I agree with you that you should not throw it at the feet of the players. You could probably do it a little bit where it's like, hey,
the encore
guys, they were big personalities. We took a big swing. The personalities didn't mesh. It's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the first time these guys have done it. We understand why we had to do it. You know what I mean? Like there's ways to like kind of tell that story where everyone would think it was totally reasonable. Like Harden's asked out of 4 teams now or 3 teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like KD left a Warriors team where they would have won the championship every year. Every year they would have won it.
And I just mean you don't want to be the team, the organization that scapegoats it on these players.
No,
right?
But you could do it a little.
It works,
right? You could do it a little.
You can allude to it. You
could do it a little bit. You could do it a little bit to tell the story about why you now need to reset it.
Yes.
Like that's all I mean is that they could have done it. Okay, look, we're gonna get out of here. We got some Cam Thomas stuff that we want to talk about. We also have a bunch of people in YouTube. We're going to roll into just a little bit of Cam Thomas talk in the next episode. And then we're going to take some questions here for a little mailbag session over on YouTube. So stick around if you're over here on YouTube live. Make sure you just hit the subscribe, Locked On Nets. We're going to be with you all 82 games, win like 0-82, baby. We're going to come 5 days a week. 0-82. That's the promise to you. Lose every game. We're still Monday through Friday on this bad boy with Locked On Nets.
I won't predict anything historic, but nothing is impossible. Well, that's Mikey Phelps.
Oh, my goodness. One of the all-time aquatic poets. We'll be back again in a second on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah. Coming up with the offseason looking like it should come sooner than later. Cam Thomas has emerged as an elite talent. Does the organization like him? Does the fan base believe in him? And would you trade him for a player like Donovan Mitchell? Oh, all the angles of Cam Thomas coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms and live with our bonus session on YouTube with you, the fans, talking about today. A little Cam Thomas, Doug, because I continue to be growing more and more fascinated about the way he gets discussed at every possible level. because on the one hand, this is an elite talent that the Brooklyn Nets can build around. And on the other, the Cleveland Cavs would never want a player like this in a Donovan Mitchell trade. He doesn't even have any value in the NBA. Help me, Doug.
Yeah, it's so funny about Cam. Like, he's been a polarizing player from the time he was not playing at all on the bench, and then he gets to play more and take a lot more shots, and he's still polarizing, but the polarization has only gone up levels, right? Like, we all agree he shouldn't be on the bench anymore, which was like maybe a discussion at times about like how much he should be playing. Then it was discussion, well, maybe he's a glorified, maybe all he is a six man. And so then the polarization becomes around that, where like you're like, no, he should be starting. No, he should just be a six man. Well, now most people, at least on this Nets team, would agree. I mean, everyone would agree on this Nets team that he should be a starter, obviously. So now it's like, well, what's the ceiling and how much value does he have? And that's that's the new thing. So a good sign is that if you look at the macro graph on Thomas has gone nothing but go up, right? Like, it's good, but nothing to go up with if you were. Like, shorting is the wrong thing because it's like everyone always says shorting, but that's like not how it works. But if you were like down on him, like if you were taking the downside on him, you've been proven wrong basically every step of the way, I would say. But it also is one of these things where it's like at some point there's a ceiling too, right? Like, we have to just figure out where that, and I think that's the part where we're probably stuck on now is like, what's the ceiling? What is his overall value? Like, could he command? Is he a guy that you want to build your team around? Is he a guy that could command something big on the market? I could go both ways on this. Like, this is tough. This is an interesting spot to be in heading into conceivably heading into the offseason, where the Nets are basically all but locked into being in the offseason without the playoffs.
This is also in the month of March coming off for Cam Thomas, where he averaged 36 minutes. He was giving you 27 points, shooting 46 from the field, shooting 39% from deep. We highlighted a couple episodes ago how he has 4 assists over the month of March, but you're starting to see that even tick up a little bit here too. So to your point, he's showing all the command and all of the attributes of a player that whatever it is. Ironically, there was a time when you and I discussed, well, he's really an off-ball 2 guard, right? And you need somebody else. Now, do I want to sit here and tell you plug him in as your starting point guard? No, probably not ideally, but he's pulled me far closer to that idea than I ever thought I would have been. First 2 seasons, not getting a lot of run, started this year even, where when he was on the court, you did everything you could to get the ball out of his hands. Like, the IQ is coming along for him. And this is where I don't know how to identify what the Nets should, not even what the Nets should value him as. What should the NBA value him as? Because the big talking point here is, which you and I agree is not likely or should not be the case, Donovan Mitchell. Well, we had this discussion in the middle of the year. What is Cam Thomas relative to Donovan Mitchell? Is he 70% of him? Because if he is, then why would you give up 9 draft picks or any combination thereof to go get a player that you maybe have a pretty close proximity to, and then you need to do other things? Like, I think that's the big talking point for the offseason. How does Cam Thomas and what the Nets feel about him impact the way they think they need to pursue or not pursue other decisions on the market?
Yeah, it's hard too, because the other problem is I think actually what's even more I think it's two things are super difficult with this. I think it's very difficult to know where the Nets stand on him, right? They were so wrong on him for so long that it's like unclear to like know exactly where they stand. Yeah. I think I'm even more confused about like what his league-wide value is. Like, how do other teams even see him? I'm not sure. This is a very hard situation to sort of monitor and assess when it comes to him, because he has certain skills. It's very obvious. But like, would other teams look at him and see him as like even close to a cornerstone piece, or like not even a cornerstone, like an every night rotational guy that you can keep in your lineup all the time on like a high end playoff team? I'm not sure that other teams see him like that. I think that like,
that's interesting.
He's afforded a lot of latitude on this team now because they're bad and they don't have no one else that can score or make their own shot. And so like, he's allowed to take a lot of shots. But I don't know, put him in a hierarchy. This is not against him, by the way, but like put him in a hierarchy where he's with a few other like really high end players. Like, how does he fit with that group? I'm not really sure. Right. Like, so the thought experiment more would be like, put him on a really good team right now. Where would he land? Would he be in the rotation? Like, just put him on any good team, Boston, Denver, any playoff team right now. Where would Cam Thomas be in the rotation? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Like, and I think that's the hardest question to answer. Like, is how these other teams view his value. I could see it really being all over the place.
And I wonder too, because I want to pose a different question to you as far as league wide goes, but I also wonder like the perception piece of it too, right? Like if you're an NBA talent, we talked about this when the Nets drafted him. Well, he's a later first round pick, and we'd say if you redrafted, he would certainly go much higher, right? The Nets got a steal based
Yes,
on where you drafted him. Okay. But then if you're a top 15 player and you go to a bad team and you put up the kind of numbers that Cam Thomas is putting up this season, I think the perception would be, well, if you get him to the better team or if you have the better players around him, like I wonder how much that tracks him, that follows him. There's obviously a reason why other teams passed on him. Maybe they didn't believe that everything was going to come around, that the 3-point production could be sustained at the NBA level, or that you could trust him with the ball in his hands to be able to make the right reads, right? So there's some developmental stuff here that you could point to and say it's changed the perception around the league and that could elevate it. But I just wonder if pedigree and if the way you're viewed as a prospect, how long does that track with you into your NBA career? Because I could list plenty of players that were taken top 5, top 10, and they're productive. They put up points. Their team stinks. They lose a lot of games. But you're always thinking, if we just get the right pieces around them, they're going to be able to flourish. We're going to be able to win here. You know,
or it's why you don't give up on those guys, or like you don't give up on those guys. Like
right.
you don't give up on like Jalen Green. Like you drafted him really high. There's a reason you did it. You don't give up. And then you hope that he turns the corner, and then he does, right? Yeah. Obviously. And now, some people at the time thought Cam should be drafted higher, and his stock really fell. And sometimes it wasn't clear why, if it was like sort of attitude based or whatever. But he was, clearly fell past where people thought he was originally going to get drafted, landed at the Nets, and the Nets did a good job by drafting him, right? Like you're correct. He's outperformed his slot. He's still really young. He's improved every year. They screwed around with his minutes so much early on that it's like hard to like totally trust his development. The development track has not been linear, and that's going to be a really hard situation for any player to sort of like maintain consistency. That being said, he's been given, like I said, incredible latitude now to run parts of the offense and take a lot of shots, more than a lot of other guys his age in similar situations. So I think to some degree it's catching up, because a lot of other young guys like this aren't given this kind of playing time and shot and usage, right? Like, so it is evening out, but I just don't know if it's evening out enough where we can like totally tell. This is not anti-Cam Thomas. I just mostly like, I don't know how other teams, I can make a case still about trading for him, make a case. I can make a case against it. I could.
Right, keeping him, building around him, like right. You can make a case that the Nets should hold on to him and make him a part.
I can make a case for him. I can make a case for and against it very easily. Both
100%.
Yeah.
Coming up here in a second, I'm going to tie the Cam Thomas perception into one Mikal Bridges, and then we'll also discuss the Donovan Mitchell potential trade. Do you want Cam Thomas to be here with Donovan Mitchell if it was even feasible? We'll talk about those angles of the offseason coming up here in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. That's what you're doing over there with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home the huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue our Cam Thomas discussion episode, reminder, live on YouTube, get your questions up at Locked On Nets. Segment number 3, we'll get a look in there. Give us your thoughts on Cam Thomas. Do you want him to be a cornerstone piece? Do you believe in him for Brooklyn? Or would you send him off to maybe recalibrate this team? And that's where I do find it interesting. So the tie to Mikal Bridges, I'll just say, Cam Thomas was never really cast in the role that Mikal was in Phoenix as in being a key supporting player. He was basically buried and then all of a sudden started to get ramped up and then thrust into this role that he has now with Brooklyn. But do you think that maybe there is, and I don't mean that the Mikal Bridges informs this for other teams, but just that same thing. Well, Mikal Bridges on Phoenix in X role versus Mikal Bridges in new role now with the Brooklyn Nets. Cam Thomas on Brooklyn, bad team, plenty of minutes, go do your thing, as you mentioned, versus playoff team, championship aspiration team. Where does he fit in? Can he be relied on? And could he maybe plug in as the third best player on a championship team if you had two of the other right guys in place? But that demands that he be highly productive, maybe on limited volume.
Yeah, I can't go there at all. I don't think that's right now. At least his current version of him. He's 22, so there's room for growth here.
Yeah,
So
I mean, like, what's like the best version of him, maybe as well, right?
Yeah, he's not a finished product for sure. Right now, no, I don't think you can do that. And again, like he just needs to. There's just a few things that are working against him to get to that level. By the way, this is again not enough. I've always to qualify everything with him because if you're in this day and age, if you say something that's not like supremely 1,000% positive, like you're anti the player, it's like very clearly not the case here. But there's just certain disadvantages he has. Like he still doesn't read the court perfectly. He's made huge strides here, right? Like he had great pass to Clowney here at the block on a roll. Like I think the court vision is getting much better. Size is always going to be an issue. It's like hard to just be this size. Like you need to be so great if you're going to be 6'3". You just have to be Kyrie or Steph. Like to be at that level, at like the highest level basketball player, if you're going to be that, and like amazing on defense, like Derek White or something.
Right.
Like,
which is another big part of this too.
These are the other things like you have to be like capable on offense and amazing on defense if you're going to be that size. So these things are always just be like a little self-limiting for him. Overall, it's probably why I think we see it like him not be involved in a trade. Like I think it'd be better to just keep him, see what you can develop. I let me put it this way. I doubt they would ever get like what anyone would consider like sort of fair market value on him, or especially what they're going to need from him. Like he's going to be really important for this team next year because they're not going to be able to score. They're not going to be able to score again. Like you think they have trouble scoring this year? Again, wait till next year. Like there's going to be a lot of the same cast of characters here. They're going to need him just around to just put fans in the seats and score some baskets. Like that might be his most important thing next year. Like that, he might be the most important guy in the Nets next year, just from that standpoint.
Yeah, you think about guys like Jalen Wilson. We see some more Noah Clowney now, but you don't look at any of these other young players that are going to get more minutes and more run as we go into next season and say, oh, well, that's where they'll start to share the scoring load. It's going to be the same people, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, right, that you're looking to help carry this load.
And by the way, we've seen it with Bridges, but I said this in the 2 episodes ago and actually looked at the numbers about like where his scoring had gone. It's like stark where Bridges' his shots are going. He's going right back to being a 3-and-D guy. Like he is all the way back. Like it was 5-day. If you look at his like 5-day running average of field goal attempts to 3-point attempts, or excuse me, the other way around, percentage of shots at a 3-point attempts, it's gone all the way up the ski slope, like to like 50, 60, 65% of his shots are threes, which just means he's just going back to a guy who can't really score anywhere else but from the 3-point line. So you're not, after we've gotten a whole season of it now, you cannot expect him to get scoring from him on a consistent nightly basis. So they just like need Thomas next year to not score 70 points a night, honestly.
I one off the mark here about places that he could play or whatever. We were talking about, championship aspiration teams. Okay, you're not going to put him there. But like I was just thinking like San Antonio, like when you have Wemby and you look at their roster and needing some more scoring production in behind, like I think there are also teams, maybe you say bad teams, or even like out of the play-in tournament teams that you'd look at and based on the way they're constructed, kind of we're talking about the Nets, well, they need to have a player that can get buckets, that can score. I could probably look around the league and see some teams that would say, well, we can go from being, a bottom feeder to competitive, or from almost competitive to play-in tournament bound if we had a type of electric scorer like this. But you bring up the good point about what is the value? So the Nets took him late first round. Does he have first round pick value in a trade right now? Would he probably? But what does that mean relative to Brooklyn and getting a first round pick in draft X versus having that production on the court right now? So that's why I do find him fascinating for the Nets and maybe even league wide, because they're probably, I'm sure you could probably list a handful of players off the top of your head, and maybe Jalen Green's a good example in Houston coming on here now after being sluggish, of we're talking Nets internal. But if you went high level, there's a lot of guys that can do things-ish like what Cam Thomas is doing. He's not a unicorn talent in that regard, even if we think he's valuable.
No, he has extreme talent in one area, which is he can really score the basket on very difficult shots. he also can just take a lot of bad shots too. But I mean, for the most part, like we've seen, he has pretty unique shot making ability, I would say, compared to like a lot of NBA players. I think there is growth on his court vision. I think he seems to be really in tune to like trying to make that happen. We've seen the assist numbers go up month by month. He's probably run a little bad on assists too, because guys just like not finishing pretty easy setups that he had. But that could be a thing where it's like, hey, you just watch him a lot and you expect to see something, and the team's not bad. So I think the assist numbers could probably, frankly, be a little higher. But yeah, like looking around, most other teams have, I take that back. Some other guys have sort of like, microwave scoring kind of guys on the team. He has more space to be able to do a lot more, but he's also better at it than most guys too. Yeah. And so I just don't know. I get really confused about this. And I've been low on Thomas, probably relative to some other people. And I think that some things are still correct, by the way. Like some of the takes that we've had are still correct. I was like probably lower on his ability to probably like sort of hit the level that he's hit this year. I was going to be hard for me to see. It was also sort of hard for me to see like a scenario where he was going to be allowed to be able to do this much also on the team.
Right.
Right. And we've also hit this other scenario that I didn't see coming. So that's not to say I was like right about that part. I wasn't. I was wrong. I think he's been better, but it's also what sort of clouds my sort of ability to be able to see how the rest of the league is going to see it.
And that's why in some ways it makes me long for the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Brooklyn Nets, where Cam Thomas was at least shown capable of doing this consistently, what he's doing now. And then what does that look like, right? Where would he have fit in if you had a very clear hierarchy, very clear superstars, and what would your role be? We often talk about him as the microwave scorer coming off the bench, sixth man leading a second unit. Fascinating to dream on that. Great news. We'll never get to see that. But coming up next, what if the Nets do want to go after Donovan Mitchell? Is he the type of player that could help unlock Cam Thomas and take this team out of the cellar? Let's have that discussion coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, live games, highlights, in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as a Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV and provides access to billions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. And it's opening weekends, baseball. It's a college basketball tournament. You're going to want to watch it all with Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of your latest videos of your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big league pro and college conferences as well. They got NBA, MLB, March Madness, so much more, plus news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV.
All right, so as we continue our Locked On Nets episode live on YouTube, feel free to throw your comments in there, and let's see if we can go ahead and get your pulse of the fan base, because there is this overarching thing, which maybe, honestly, not maybe, we know we're going to talk about the Donovan Mitchell of it all in the offseason and what the Nets are willing to do and the fit and the cost and the price and all of those things. But I'm interested how the Nets fan base feels about Cam Thomas right now and whether or not you think it's worth it to cast him off for a draft pick or take the long view and believe that he could actually be a key cornerstone piece over the next 5 years in Brooklyn.
Yeah, look, we'll hit a couple questions here. I'm going to go this real quick. I don't think Cleveland would take Cam Thomas to the centerpiece of a deal for Donovan Mitchell. Let me just, I'll say that real quick, and then we'll hit some questions to finish out the episode. I just don't think that like it fits the way the rest of the team is built. Like, I just think that's it. Like, I don't think you would pair that well with Garland. Like, we've already seen, he's just like a not as good version of Donovan Mitchell, and that didn't really work with Garland. So, like, I just don't know why that would be him. Again, not a knock on Cam Thomas. I'm just saying, like, for that particular team, I'm not sure why he would be a centerpiece of that deal unless their hands were totally tied.
And this comes back to the idea of what is his value around the league, because you know me, Doug. When I talk trade machines, I talk 2-3 teams getting involved. Like, ultimately, does he have value where Cleveland would look at it as you're an asset? We can bring you in, pass you along, get something back for you, right? Find a different landing spot to go ahead and still get ourselves additional value out of this. We always say with that Donovan Mitchell, the asking price is going to maybe end up being players that you think you want to have here in the core around him, like a Mikal Bridges potentially going forward. Okay.
We got some good ones in here.
Fire
That I don't know if people have asked to be put on this, but I knew this was going to come up, and if you're on the podcast, we're going to throw some questions up here on live. I knew this would happen. We can't tell that you don't like them. I knew this would happen. You can't say anything about anybody. Like you can't say.
But before you address Jug specifically here,
I'm gonna
explain to me
one
to one why you don't like him. Like explain to me one to one why you don't like Cam Thomas.
I like him fine. He's good. I told you I was wrong. I was wrong on the assessment here. I'm just saying that the assessment has continually changed and gone up. Now that's a case for he's better than we all think. Because if like I said, to go back to the beginning, if he's been polarizing the whole time and the polarization graph just continues to go up, then can we expect like sort of linear progress on like his development?
Yeah.
I don't think you can, but you could also say we haven't seen the ceiling right. Haven't seen the ceiling yet.
How about Greg here? With Mikal was never a number one and should have never been put just a good player. This is what we've talked about, right? Over evaluating if you're Sean Marks, the value of a player, trying to make the best thing that you can. And one of two things, actually, something we've never discussed is the idea of if you viewed him maybe somewhat correctly, he's a high-level player, but he's not a number one, and we don't want to put him there. There's a world where the Nets should have kept on going and continued to make bigger moves even off of the Kevin Durant one, getting Mikal and Cam Johnson, because what you ended up doing was over-slotting players in your hierarchy and creating a dysfunctional roster, right? Like that's something that I think maybe it's hard to do that if you're a GM, but you should have gone almost even more aggressive and keep taking swings and try to get involved in any players available to really reconstruct the team on the fly and make them competitive.
Yeah, we've already said this, that they just they had a chance to sort of take on a bunch of other like maybe depressed assets and sort of rebuild, but they didn't want to do that, right? They didn't want to come out of the KD and Kyrie era, and Harden era and have it be bad again.
He talks about some of these moves real quick here from Jean Ramey. There's something else that we've also said, even if just to be clear, if you haven't seen the episodes, Doug and I are not, it's not a knock on Donovan Mitchell. We are not a pro trade for Donovan Mitchell podcast because we still think there'll be about a 9 or 10 team at best trying to get in the play-in tournament. We probably a little bit higher than that. But if the ceiling is talking about them being a 7th seed, a 6th seed with kind of low ceiling expectations of making the Eastern Conference Finals, that's where you need to stop short of putting a bunch of your assets on the table to go get a player that doesn't move the needle far enough, that still requires another move, and you don't have any of that capital necessarily to go facilitate that.
Yeah, if you can get one of these guys, if Mitchell gets all the way to free agency and you can get him without giving up any picks,
right?
Then all for it. And they will have max slots open in 2025. And if you think that these guys can get all the way to free agency, unrestricted free agency, then I'm going to change my tune. The problem is these guys just haven't been hitting free agency, right? Like KD and Kyrie were literally the last two to do it. that were actually like huge needle movers.
Right.
No one else has hit unrestricted free agency like with that kind of talent. It's just everyone's signing early, taking the money, and asking for trades later. Maybe that changes with the new CBA, or the new TV deal, and the cap spikes in 25. And there's like, sort of unprecedented abilities to like make a lot of money on the open market, a la sort of what happened in those last cycles, like with KD and with the Warriors and stuff. But that's a risk, like, right? Yeah. Because otherwise you are unloading assets to get one of these other guys. So if you really are confident that they're going to hit it, I'm actually for that part. I'd be okay with that. It's the unloading everything, mortgaging the future once again for guys who aren't on like that KD level.
Right.
Like that would be a mistake. That's all I'm saying.
Scam likely came in with, just like Curry, you need to put complementary pieces around Thomas. Listen, this is dangerous. There's a dangerous statement to make when you're on the Locked On Nets chat here on YouTube for Doug Norrie. Go ahead.
It's not dangerous. It's silly. Like, I mean, can we stop like Steph Curry? And by by the way, their games aren't even.
Thomas is basically right there. Like, I mean, okay.
I can't. I'm not even address this. I was gonna say. Going to the reasons they're not the same and their games aren't the same, but it's too silly to even think. They're just like, their games aren't the same. Steph Curry's like a top 10 all-time player, and we're talking about Cam Thomas. So
you know what too, like, and I will say about it before we get to Gerard here, a frequent flyer with us, I will also say that like this is also what happens when you're a fan of a team and an organization that's just throwing things against the wall and it all seems chaotic and messy. You see a young player that's like performing well, you want them to turn into that thing because you're like, well, if Cam Thomas becomes, a top 25 guy, well, all right. Like, look, we got lucky and fell into this thing, right? If Nick Claxton, I mean, I've been as guilty of this as anyone, waiting for the next step, the next evolution of his game. Okay, if the mid-range is something just around the basket, inside the elbow, but when that doesn't quite get there, you have to just acknowledge what a player is, at least currently, and not start to make maybe fringe dangerous comps when you talk to other players and stars, elite all time.
Well, it's funny though, but the reason I started that one is like to sort of laugh at it a little bit, but also to highlight the like how the fan base has really feels about this guy.
And
right?
You're desperate for it, right? Yeah, you're desperate for him to be that good. And you're like, come on, bring him let's get talent around him so that he can.
And like I said, where people even like us along the way, or me, have been wrong along the path, it's easy for like to me be wrong again. Right. Like it's easy to look at the statements down and be like, oh, you're still too low. It could be true. But it highlights, yes, the fan base here is starved, rightfully so, for like anybody that can be good, because here's the problem. We argue about Cam Thomas. After him, there's no arguments. You know why? Because they all stink.
Yep.
like that's like, so it's there's no arguments to even have. Everyone agrees. Everyone's in total lockstep after him. It's like, what's everyone else? Bad / overpaid / overrated. No, like we're not arguing about anybody else. That's the sad state of affairs, that like Cam's been slotted into this argument zone, mostly because the rest of the team is without argument. They're all not as good as anyone thought they were going to be. That's actually the biggest problem.
Before we close out with Gerard here, that's like, OKC when they got young, they had all these talent. There's so many different players, and there's who should it be? Like, if we're going to maybe move a guy to bring in a guy, what decisions will we make? There's all of this talent in different positions in different ways. You go, oh, well, who should the core be? Then that's as you say, Cam Thomas. And Day'Ron Sharpe is a Nicholas.
I just never thought about that before until right now. Sometimes like these ideas come out and you're like, oh, that's actually the thing. It's like there's no one else
with no other choice. We will cling to the hope of anything. Yeah.
No one's even interesting after him. Like he's at least interesting. Like interesting, and then we can like disagree a little bit, because after that it's like, well, Simmons 0 gone. He like that's over. Cam Johnson, the contract is looking bad already, right? Like it's just like he's probably almost for sure never going to live up to that contract. Claxton, we can talk about a little bit, though. Every game that passes, it gets harder and harder to see you wanting to pay money. Like no one, like who's out there really wanted to sign Nick Claxton to like a really big money contract. Maybe those people are out there. McHale, we know exactly what he is now.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so we've gotten a long sample size with that. And after that, I'm not even sure we have to talk about anybody else. So it's like, it's almost like Cam's unfortunately just the only guy that's even interesting that you might have a little disagreement about, and that you can sort of dream on maybe having a higher ceiling that he has now.
Gerard said your name 3 times now, because it's hard for us to close out our episodes sometimes. Live on YouTube, obviously talking a little bit of Cam Thomas. Gerard, what's the story about Houston cannot keep both Sengun and also Jalen Green with contract extensions? Can we pry away maybe one of them from Houston? I mean, obviously we know that it's all but been reported about the Jalen Green scenario and the package, whether or not that would be on the table again for Brooklyn in the offseason, whether or not it would be less draft picks included, we don't know, TBD. But would you find that fascinating to maybe go after Sengun and bring him in as the new centerpiece of what the Nets want to accomplish?
Yeah, they're both coming up on team options for this year. Like they're going into next year, they both have team options, which I'm sure will be exercised, and then like with the hope that they'll work out one of these new extensions.
Yeah.
I don't think they can pay both, but I think they can pay. I think they have it in there to pay both, but like they're being the cap for 1 year as they clear away 1 year of the Van Vliet thing. I'd be sure about that one, but like their cap is pretty clean in 25-26 outside of Van Vliet, but he makes such a big number at 45 that maybe that will preclude them from signing both to like what they're now worth. I mean, Green's like clearly played himself into like a bigger number now, like just for the sample size. So maybe there's a world where they just like want to consolidate a little bit. They have so much young talent too, that they probably could consolidate a little bit and into like someone superstar-ish, but like the Nets don't really have that. Like this is where this is where Nets fans have also like told themselves like the wrong story. Like everyone wants it both ways. It's like Bridges isn't that good, but if you want him, I mean, we're going to need Şengün and some picks back. It's like, come on. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, so I think that's the problem. So I think if those guys hit the market might even be beyond what Brooklyn can do. And now they could probably get them, but it would take a lot, right? Like, and this is what happens when you don't have young talent. You haven't drafted forever. You don't have the players to put into stuff.
This
right?
would be, that's like, the sending Mikal out to Houston and, and figuring out where that value versus Şengün lines up, and then the picks, et cetera. And okay, now you've converted it, because you even said there too about, Mikal, now we'll send him out to get XYZ back. Or even on the other version of it, if you bring in the start of Brooklyn and you have Mikal and you have Cam Johnson, I just think that, we've both been agreeing here. The sample size tells you that even with one superstar, it's not the right combination of cast here. Because, by the way, there was a team in Phoenix that had Devin Booker and had Cam Johnson and had Mikal Bridges. You know what they chose to do? Trade them away to get Kevin Durant.
And Chris Paul. And Chris Paul.
Right. Like, they made the choice of, like, this isn't good enough. We need to go even better here with a player like Devin Booker as one of our cornerstone pieces.
And that team went to the finals.
Yes.
And they didn't win, right? Like, that was a great team. They went to the finals. They just couldn't get past Giannis. And that was the year that, the Nets are going to be like, they wouldn't have been able to get past Brooklyn if they'd all stayed together too. Like, that was the year. But, like, yeah, we've seen that core, and that you need to have great players at that core to, like, be in a championship level. And I just think they're, just not where they are. Okay. We've been at it. Look, it's an hour on YouTube, baby, after the Nets get trounced. Go show me another podcast in the world that's doing that. You're not going to find it. Locked On Nets every single day. Again, I'll say this again. 0-82. 0-82. Yep. We're coming at you every single day.
That's right.
That's what it is. And by the time you listen to this, they'll probably be officially eliminated from playoff contention. But in the meantime, make sure you go over and subscribe to Locked On Nets at YouTube. Much appreciate everyone that jumped in after a game. Yeah, look, we love that everyone that's rolled with us all these years on the Locked On Nets podcast. We're going to keep going for years. Doesn't matter who's on the team. We'll complain about it, but we're still going to be here every single day. So make sure you just subscribe to YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast.
I'd rather imagine who you might be than who you actually are. That's Thomas Yates.
Oh, Tommy, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again
Tommy,
tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.